To let you know, the last two verses in today's passage speak of rest, and verses 16 and 17. But there is a difference in what the verses are saying about that rest. For indeed the gospel was preached to us as well as to them, meaning the Jews, but the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter rest. And that comes out of Hebrews. So what does this have to do with the book of Esther? Well, there is rest, and then there is a place of rest. The Bible says that for those who have believed in the gospel, they have entered their rest. Now, I'm guessing, especially after yesterday, that most of you believe that you are at rest, and yet I'm pretty sure that most of you have lots and lots to do from day to day, and possibly really don't feel rested. At least that's in my case. Ephesians 6, if you have a top opportunity to look there after today, is a great place to see that even though we have entered our rest, there's a lot of work still to do. And it is more than just like taking the trash out, mowing the lawn, painting a wall, or cleaning house. The work is an ongoing battle. But we're assured that someday that battle will end. Israel found that out for a short time during the reign of the Persian Empire. They will find it out in a more complete way some wondrous day in the future. We already know it is true from God's Word, and that we're just waiting to see Israel come to its own in their belief in Jesus Christ. May God speak to us today through His Word in a way that His glorious name is forever praised. Now, in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. Now, it has been about 9 months since Mordecai's decree has been issued to all of those in Persia. But it has been about 11 months since the issuance of Haman's decree. The enemies of the Jews have had a 2-month head start. Chapter 8 creates for us the clash of two opposing decrees, and now the suspense of what has been brewing for about 9 months is about to be revealed. These Jews have moved into every province in the empire. They've established themselves. They've also kept separate from others, and most likely, as Jews do, have become very wealthy and prominent in the areas where they live. Now, the people envied that the things that the Jews had that they themselves had not worked for, and they eagerly anticipated taking that which they had not earned. It is a story repeated often in the history of the Jewish people, isn't it? And it is a story which is often repeated in history, I guess the history of evil societies, who desire to have what they're unwilling to earn. Of course, that doesn't happen today, does it? Now, the Hebrew word translated as hoped comes from a root word meaning to scrutinize. It signifies to wait expectantly. Now, one can see the subjects of the kingdom who are more than just hoping to act out Haman's decree. They are expecting to enrich themselves off of the plunder of the Jews. It wasn't even a hope. It was expected. So keep that in mind. no different than any governmental decree which redistributes from those who earn to those who are unwilling to do so. The desire for unmerited gain leads to forceful seizure. And we certainly see that today. Now, this is the state of things on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. The Persian Empire had been anticipating this day and wondering which decree would prevail. The day had arrived and the outcome was finally realized with the words. The opposite occurred in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. Now, those looking for a bunch of freebies at the Jews' expense, well, they wouldn't find what they had been expecting and salivating over for months. They were looking to overpower the Jews and profit off of their labors, which those people had not even earned. But instead, they were overpowered by the Jews. And the reason was because Mordecai's newer decree was allowing this. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all of the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. See, this is exactly what was authorized, if you'll remember, back in chapter 8, verse 11. The king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together. Now, as a point of clarification, the term "in their cities" means the cities where the Jews lived. Okay, it's not just Jewish cities. They didn't have just Jewish cities. They were scattered out through the entire empire. Oh, I guess I had a double in there. Now, the Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces. The implication of these words here is that the Jews remained scattered. Literally, there were 127 provinces, right? And the words pointing to the dispersion of the Jews was throughout each province. This is, if you'll recall, one of the punishments promised to the people of Israel for disobedience. Then the Lord will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other. And that was one of the decrees of Moses' law and the prophecy of Moses. Now, to lay hands on those who sought their... There's a debate among the scholars whether this was defensive only by the Jews or if the Jews were allowed to be on an offensive stance. The reason for this is that some scholars attempt to justify a more moral stand by the Jews by merely defending themselves and not being those who would take the offense in such matters. We often think that if we're going to be Bible-believing Christians, we just need to be on the defense. But that is not what the Bible teaches. We have to be on the offense. And so it is clear that some of those scholars who think that it was just a defensive matter can't be right. They had to have some offense to go along with that. So however the wording of the decree, the wording found later in this chapter, both allow and confirm offensive fighting on the part of the Jews once they're... It has been, and it continues to be, a trait of the Jewish people to defend themselves as needed. Don't we see that today? It's exactly what they do today. But to also go on the offense as the situation demands to protect themselves. Don't we see them bombing Syria when they know that there's arms there about ready to be launched against them? They take an offensive stance because of the threats against them, and we should be doing the same thing. Nothing is wrong with this, and there is no reason to see this is wrongdoing. It is the standard practice of all wise people and has been throughout history. Now the Jews gathered together, and no one could withstand them because fear of them fell upon all people. Now, the German scholar Johannes Brenz states this about this fear. We have above such an example in Haman, who was himself hung on the cross, which he had prepared for Mordecai. So the Egyptians were themselves overwhelmed with the sea. Think about when the Jews left Egypt and were gathered there by the sea, to which they had been driven to in order to overwhelm them. But what happened to them? The sea swallowed up the Egyptians. Saul, who had driven out David over to the Philistines that they might destroy him, was himself destroyed by the Philistines. Numerous other such episodes are recorded in Scripture and throughout history. It is assured that the enemies of God who attempt to destroy his people are often destroyed in this very similar manner in that which they intended to put onto the Jews. But, of course, that's just luck, right? Or would you say it's divine intervention? I would choose the latter. And all of the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Now, they are said to have helped the Jews. But the Hebrew word used in this word for help is literally translated as lifted up. In other words, those helping them would have given the Jews, might be encouragement or praise. It might even be governmental assistance in a material matter, and so on. Do we do that today with the Israel people? We don't go fight their battles, but we help them with materials, information. What's the word I'm looking for? Intelligence. There we go. I didn't have any at the moment. But intelligence. Yeah, so we share that with them. It's the same thing that was happening there. So the Jews could protect themselves. They had the backing of the region and the local officials in order to assure their success. And the reason for this lifting up is one reason. Well, maybe two. Because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Now, this is explicitly stating the reason. He was the highest ruler in the land, and only the king was above him. And he held governmental authority over their jobs and their livelihood. So, I'd be a little scared of him too. However, there are also two other reasons for this. The first is obviously that it would have become known at this point that Esther was Jewish, just like Mordecai. Though it is unstated, it would have probably not harmed Mordecai's charge in any way that, the queen is also Jewish. And the second reason is just as certain. You see, the Lord, up to this point, had directed the events so that they would occur just as they had. We have already been told in verse 8:17, if you remember, that many became Jews because of the edict which was published by Mordecai. And we talked about that in a previous lesson. The fear of the unseen God who directed the affairs of the Jews would have been presented in the people's minds, even if it was a subliminal presence. The Lord has directed, and the people were affected by his guiding hand. Just like us, whether they realized it or not. Sometimes the Lord just takes care of us. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent. Now Mordecai's authority and fame became greater and greater over this 9-month period. You might think of it like in America, he would be like the next person who would be nominated to be president. It is because of this great prominence of Mordecai that Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. Their work was complete in its intended scope. They had complete control over the battles against those that were threatening them. The entire premise of Haman's casting of the lot was to determine the most advantageous day for the destruction of the Jews. And yet, what was supposedly this advantageous day? It was advantageous for the Jews, not those that were their enemies. The attempts of those who try to conjure up designs against the Lord and what He desires and His plans, they're usually just worthless. Matter of fact, all the time, they're worthless. This verse brings together what we've been talking about throughout this song, and I don't want to wear you out, but it tells us another set of twos. This one will go on from here until verse 12. And then the next part of the twos will go from verse 13 through verse 15. But it will be the only set of twos we observe today, so relax, okay? But there is a reason, folks, that we see things in pairs. It's throughout the entire Bible. And when we recognize those things, it affirms what the Bible is telling us. And so we need to know and recognize those things. And this is exactly what Esther, at least as I've been studying, has revealed to me. That when I read other things, I go, that's a pair. And that emphasizes this message. And the Bible does that throughout the Old and the New Testament. And in Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Adam Clarke has this to say about this particular verse. It is strange that in this city, where the king's mind must have been known so well known, there should be found 500 persons to rise up in hostility against those whom they knew the king had befriended. That kind of makes sense. I mean, here you are in the nation's capital, and still you have 500 men who come against you? Wait a minute. That doesn't seem quite right. Now remember, Haman, the Amalekite, was not just an Amalekite. He was an Agag Amalekite. He was of a kingly descent. The ancient hatred meant that on this day, the two decrees set up a division. It was either kill or be killed. It was that simple. Both factions had every reason to use this day to be within the law to destroy one another. The prophecy against Amalek would be fulfilled, and a part of that fulfillment was to come through the book of Esther. This includes the destruction of the entire family of the Amalekites. Also, Parashadatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Permashta, Arisiah, Aridiah, and Vahasatha. You know how long I practiced that? I just did that so you would be impressed, because I practiced that a long time. So, it should be noted that in the Hebrew Bible, the names of these 10 sons are written in a very unusual way. They're not written in the Hebrew from right to left, like Hebrew words are. Instead, they don't follow each other, from right to left. Instead, they're written one below the other. Isn't that interesting? Very rare. It is unusual, and the reasons, well, let me just say it this way. There's been various reasons that have been suggested for this listing of the names. And one is, of course, to give prominence. Maybe the oldest one was listed first, and so forth. But if you want to have some fun, go on the internet and pull down the reasoning or the understanding or revelation that is given by the sons of Haman, those 10 sons, and how they died. There are all kinds of theories and suggestions and all kinds of different things that are just mind-blowing. And it's just people trying to make stuff up. But it is entertaining, I'm telling you. Because the reasoning for this, we'll find that out maybe today. If not, in a lesson or two. Here's what it looks like. Reasons why it's listed this way. But there only needs to be one. Some say it signifies that they were hanged on one pole, one above another at fixed distances. And this does make more sense. Being written one on top of the other, as if arranged on a single pole, this gives us a special confidence into the actual height of Haman's gallows. Remember how tall those were? 75 feet? That seems a little ridiculous. But if it's also used for this, it starts to make more sense. And that way, all the 10 could be hung from it in this way. Additionally, there are several unusually sized letters in their names. And it is a curiosity that many have attempted to find a secret meaning in. And there's all kinds of theories on that too. But it's really quite simple. And then there are all types of pictures, both Jewish and Christians, for how the hanging of these 10 sons would look. And then there are all types of presumptions and theories. And it gets pretty wild, but it is really simple. Because the Bible pictures one thing, and it is designed to picture one thing, and so does this. The common error of people looking for the Bible to fit something rather than the account fitting what is told to us in the Bible. So often that's what we want to do, isn't it? That looks like this, so it must mean this. Instead of saying, this is what it says, this is what it means. But we want to use our imaginations like crazy. But I will explain the meaning of the hanging of the 10 in our final lesson coming in a couple of weeks. But this gives you a solid picture of what most likely the hanging of the 10 sons would have looked like. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed. But they did not lay hand on the plunder. I mean, this is kind of interesting, as you're going to see in just a moment. It can be surmised that the 10 sons of Haman had attempted to take revenge for their father's death. But that just turned back on their own heads against them. Their destruction fit a particular part of God's plan for the preservation of the Jews. A plan which went so far and no further as they did not take those 10 men's plunder. They just got rid of them and did a little bit more. The Jews, according to the decree, had the right to plunder their enemies, but they chose to not exercise this right. They merely sought deliverance and vengeance upon their enemies, nothing more. The battle was not won for profit, as what the Persians, their enemies, were looking for, but for protection and self-preservation. In this, nobody could accuse them of profiting off what was about to occur. This precedent was seen in their forefather Abraham, right? Many centuries earlier, where it says, "But Abraham said to King Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Adam rich. And we see the same premise here. The Jews, according to the decree, had that right. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan, the citadel, was brought to the king. The record of those lost in battle is normally meticulously recorded, right? We see those listings a lot in the Old Testament. This is how many people died. This is what happened. We see that. The number of the subjects lost would be important to the king to know the state of the empire. What type of animosity might have existed, and if something more might need to be done. What is striking, though, is the number of Jews that died is not mentioned. And the king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman." Now the king now passes the details on to his queen, Queen Esther. As reports from the rest of the kingdom, from India to Ethiopia, would take weeks to arrive, he can only mentally start calculating what the total number of subjects in his kingdom who may have died by what had happened in the capital, the citadel. 27 provinces. He then proceeds with this statement: "What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces?" Now, it is either rhetorical questioning for Esther to imagine the magnitude of the slaughter, or it is an exclamatory statement. Either way, the king has shown the greatness of the engagement in just the citadel alone and what possibly has happened throughout the rest of the kingdom. Now, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. Or, what is your further request? It shall be done. The king indicates that he has fully and sufficiently granted her and Mordecai's request and given her all that she had ever hoped for. But he graciously then offers her even more. This offer of the desires of her heart could be that it was as much his fault as Haman's. He's kind of feeling a little guilty here, because after all, it was Haman's decree, but whose name was on it? The king. So he's thinking, "Hey, queen, I'm going to make this even a little sweeter for you, because I kind of messed up too." I never do that, do I? No. With both decrees over and done, he offers her a granting of an all-new together request, not based on any type of retribution. Thus, this grant to her is one of mercy, while this one is a grant of special favor. It is a grant of grace. Are you seeing a picture? Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan, the citadel, to do again tomorrow according to what today's decree said. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." Wow. Some scholars find it hard to imagine that a woman would have such an attitude of violence. It is not unlikely that those who had once thought to destroy the Jews, who had openly been taunting them for 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, had gone into hiding on the day of the slaughter. That wouldn't happen. With the past decrees, they could go about life happily hating the Jews once again. They just come back out of the gutters and go about their lives, waiting for their moment to unexpectedly strike in the future. However, the state of hidden evil would be foiled by the passing of this new edict, one to be so fresh that many of the people would. But the Jews would. This, you got to think about it, is an exceptional idea of Esther to make such a request. I sure wouldn't have thought of it. I'm like, hey, we did our job today. Wait a minute, we got to do more tomorrow? Think of it this way. It is comparable to what occurred with Joseph Mengele or Adolf Eichmann and the others who fled to Argentina after World War II. And there was a lot of them. When faced with their own destruction, those Nazis, they went into hiding, didn't they? Esther wanted to ensure that those in Shushan who spent the day hiding would be rooted out and exterminated as well. But the queen had more on her mind. Let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Wait a minute. What has already happened? They're dead. And now we're going to hang them again? Why? This was one tradition of the Jews that would be universally known throughout the Jewish kingdom. Hanging a person on a tree as a sign of a curse. It goes back to the book of Deuteronomy. If a man has committed a sin deserving of death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, for he who is hanged is accursed of God. And we're told that in Deuteronomy. The New Testament, Paul takes that verse and applies it to Jesus Christ, doesn't he? Keep this in mind as you consider what we're seeing being pictured in the book of Esther. The law of removing the body from a tree, now think about this, it says that you're not to leave it overnight. They died the day before. You got a night coming. And then you're going to hang them? You see, the law says nothing of taking them down when you're outside the land. It only was inside the Jewish promised land. So they may have hung there for a day, or they may have hung there till there's nothing but bones on the shish kebab. However, their hanging would be a sign to the Jews of the curse that was upon their enemies, and it would be a sign to all the others of the disgrace and the potential punishment against such offenders in the future. The punishment of the children, as with Haman's sons, for the iniquity of their father, is prophesied in Isaiah 14. Specifically, though, it is a warning against the king of Babylon at that time. But many have taken the passage to refer to Satan himself. However, that is very unlikely. Rather, it is more comparable to the one who appears as Satan on the earth in the future, which we would know as the Antichrist. Part of what we are seeing here in Esther is a foreshadowing of what lies ahead for the Antichrist prophesied by Isaiah. Here's what Isaiah says. All the kings of the nations, all of them sleep in glory, everyone in his own house, but you are cast out of your grave like an abominable branch, like the garment of those who are slain, thrust through with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a corpse trodden underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land and slain your people. The brood of evildoers shall never be named. Prepare slaughter for his children, because of the iniquity of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land, and fill the face of the world with cities. It's in Isaiah 14. This relating of what is occurring in Esther as a prophetic picture of the future is explained by theologian John Lane. I didn't make this up, people. Somebody else did. He says this: that the Jews really executed this climax of punishment may indicate the especially severe judgment that will overtake those who are the principal agents of Antichrist on earth. And this illustrates the truth that opposition against whatever is antagonistic to goodness and piety must rise till it reaches its overwhelming acme, its overwhelming crescendo. This is a principle valid even for Christians, that they must be in a hostile attitude to evil to the last degree. And folks, we do not see that today with Christians. We kind of go, that's okay. That's okay. You can do an abortion as long as it's, before 15 months. It's okay. You can do this. You can do that. It's okay. We don't fight evil as the Bible.
That's on you.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. That's on you.
Yeah.
And
That's a whole nother story. But he says this back in the 1850s. So the king commanded this to be done. The decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 dead sons. The decree was for the additional day of slaughter. The hanging would have come simply by the word of the king. The king said, hey, put them on the skewer, get them up there. It would have been done. The king had agreed to Esther's request and granted it without amendment or any protest. The victory over the enemy of the Jews, specifically the Amalekites, would continue to that next day. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men at Shushan. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. Again, the words here reflect the Jews' determination to not tie the death of their enemies in with profit, but for protection and self-preservation. This ends what I talked about before, the set of twos that I spoke about. The first in verses 5 through 12, and then the second, which started in verse 13 and has gone now to 15. What is happening here, these two times that are authorized for the Jews to take vengeance on their enemy in the citadel of Shushan specifically. You see, these two different actions, these two different decrees, they contrast in that one is in response to overcome Haman's mandate of destroying the Jews, right? Got to have that second one to overrule the first one. This second one was by an offer of grace. But the two confirm that the enemies of the Jews will be destroyed completely and sufficiently according to what God has ordained. The remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder throughout the rest of the kingdom. We're under attack by the enemies. Now, this verse appears highly unusual as it is written in Hebrew. And a lot of scholars, they kind of struggle over why it's written in such an unusual way. But we have seen through Esther, when something's written unusually, it's telling us something very specific. It first notes that the Jews, not in Shushan, gathered together, the rest of the empire, Jews, gathered together to protect their lives. This would have occurred on or before the 13th day of the month. So they gathered up a few days before, and on the 13th, boom, they defended themselves. It then says that they had rest from their enemies. Now, this seemingly would have occurred on or after the 14th of the month. Do you see what's happening here? It then seems to revert to the events of the 13th of the month by saying they killed 75,000 in their slaughter. However, the Hebrew word for rest here is a noun. It's not a verb. It is only used twice in the entire Bible, this Hebrew word. Once in 2 Chronicles 6:41 when speaking of the resting place of the Lord, and the other is here in Esther. What it appears to be saying is that in gathering, they're gathering together before implementation of the edict and the slaughtering of those enemies, they had already achieved their rest. Think about that for just a moment. Just the knowledge of them being able to have a decree from Mordecai to gather gave them rest. It wasn't so much the rest after they had killed their enemies. Mordecai's decree granted them the right to gather, which provided them rest. That rest provided them assurance, peace, that they could gather with a hope of protection. When they got that decree, which happened 9 months prior, knowing that they could protect themselves and kill their enemies. They had entered their rest even before their enemies were destroyed. It is reflected and a reflection of what Christians are to be today. Remember Hebrews 4:3 says that those who believe, we have entered our rest. It is a noun in the Greek translation. And yet, we are still actively engaged every day in a spiritual battle, aren't we? Kind of hard to rest, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But we've been promised something. See, Brent's place of rest at the Vantage Point condominiums. I can walk in, and that's where I go to rest. But I don't rest. When I am in my place of rest, but I don't, well, I guess I do. But I continue to battle the world, don't I? I continue the work needing to be done in this world. I have accepted my place of rest in Jesus Christ, but continue to struggle to do what I am called to do in this life. Do you see that God uses words in the Bible to have specific meaning and relevance? I'm telling you, God does not waste His words. But I will tell you, Brent Spray surely does. Often. They did not lay hand on the plunder. How many times have we already heard that in these set of verses? The Jews did not initiate the conflict. They did not ask for it, but they were willing to see it through and yet not profit from it, even though they had the right to do so. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. These words support the thoughts of the previous verse, all of which occurred on the 13th day, including the rest which the people had entered. See, there is a place of rest, and there is a state of rest. The Jews of the provinces entered a place of rest, even if they did not enter into a state of rest. They now unite the two together. It says that on the 14th day of Adar, those in Shushan, they rested. The battle was over. It is a verb, not a noun. It says that in their rest, they then made it a day of feasting and gladness, a feast of drinking, a huge banquet. There would be immense joy, wine would flow, and the people would have the burdens of this life, this tragedy lifted off of their shoulders. We can continue to see the hidden hand of the Lord working continuously behind the scenes in order to deliver His people. All of this could be chalked up to time and chance, with the exception that it had already been said that these things would occur. Not the specific details, but the overall promises of protection of the Jewish people as it was given to who? Abraham. So many years before. God's continuing that protection. And so, like always in Scriptures, the result of what has come about is ultimately left up to one word for us to consider. That word is faith. God has done all the things. He has done it in such a way that it takes faith to believe. Think about it. The earth looks old, but the Bible says it's what? Young. The Lord promises destruction by a flood, but the skies are sunny. Where's our faith? Huh? Okay, that's all right. The Lord says He is our defender, but we feel so hemmed in by our enemies at times. Where's our faith? The boat is sinking, but the Lord is right there. Where is our faith? The word is written, but the resurrection of a dead man seems impossible. Where is our faith? In the end, the only thing that we can give God is our faith. Loving God requires faith that He exists. Praising God requires faith that He is listening to us. Praying to God through Jesus Christ implies we believe in the person and the work that Jesus completed. It's all about believing. You don't know how it will happen, but you know it will.